1930s, orphanages were very full because of the Great Depression. A lot of families didn't have enough money to feed all their children.
And I learned that in 1933, which Annie takes place in, 20% of the children, school children, had very poor health.
I learned about Frances Perkins. That's the part I'm playing, and she was a real cabinet member, the first female cabinet member in 1933. That was a big deal to be female and be a presidential candidate member.
I'm in the play Annie, and I learned that newspapers back then for Hoovervilles were called Hoover blankets.
During that time, people had a really hard time finding jobs.
I learned that in the mid-1930s, there were over 140,000 orphans living in orphanages.
When you're an orphan, you don't really get to have any fun because you work all the time.
The stock market crash happened in 1929, and then afterwards you had a group of people who were just really mad at Herbert Hoover, who was the president during the Great Depression, and I never really considered the aftermath of it.
I'm in the play Annie, and I learned that newspapers were sold straight on the street.
I learned what it's like to be in an orphanage.
I learned that during the Great Depression, which many of the people thought was caused by Herbert Hoover's poor management of the United States, the shanties that the people actually lived in were called Hoovervilles, and I did not know that.
And I learned that the radio was really popular in the 1930s.
I'm the play Annie, and I learned that most orphanages closed after World War II.
I've learned from being an Annie that it was the first time in American history that people actually started to emigrate, which means to leave the United States. So they left because it was so awful.
It gives us strength to survive and what we're going through right now. So
during the Depression, the wide spectrum of rich to poor, and being Daddy Warbucks, I'm on the rich side of the spectrum, and how heavily I was influenced or could influence the political aspect of the country at that time.
What I've learned so far about 1930s orphanage is that many kids like myself were just dropped off at the orphanage because their parents couldn't support them and they didn't have enough things to eat, so they would just drop them off at the orphanage, and that was how most of the kids got to the orphanage.